Good evening. My name is Thomas Reutman. I'm a hearing officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded, and a sign-in sheet is on the table in front of the room. Please be sure to sign in for our record, so if necessary, we can contact you in the future regarding the item you're here for. This public hearing is being held to consider 8 items. All 8 items are about tree removal and replacement or tree planting applications. They are order number 200-824 to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 1380 Greenwich Street. Order number 200-825 to consider removal of 2 street trees with replacement of 1 tree adjacent to 1736 Fitzgerald Avenue. Order number 200-828 to consider the removal of 4 street trees with replacement adjacent to 1965 Market Street. Order number 200-829 to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 807 Mission Street. Order number 200-830 to consider the removal of 3 street trees with replacement adjacent to 251 Ashbury Street. Order number 200-831 to consider the removal of 1 street tree without replacement adjacent to 154 21st Avenue. Order number 200-832 to consider the removal of 1 street tree without replacement adjacent to 1490 Clayton/3278 Market Street. And order number 200-837 to consider the removal of 5 street trees with replacement adjacent to 1140 Harrison Street. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts for this hearing items and listen to your testimonies and help our Director of Public Works make determination on today's hearing items. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I'll forward the findings from this hearing to the Director and make my recommendations. The Director will make the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them. So if you'd like to be notified, please sign in and give us your contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows for all of the items. I'll first ask the department's Urban Forestry Unit to make a brief presentation. The Urban Forester will give me a brief summary of the application and will have up to 5 minutes to present the item. In cases where the department denied the application, I'll have the applicant speak next, and then any member of the public can speak. And then I'll allow the department to speak again to address any concerns. In cases where the department approved the application and received protests, I'll have the protester speak next, then the applicant, and then I'll allow the department to speak again to address any concerns. If there's cases where there's mixed appeals, meaning the department approved some removals but denied others, in those cases I'll have the protesters speak after the department and then the applicant. Comments should be addressed to me and not to the department. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you can submit written testimony to me by the end of the hearing. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers. When you hear the first bell, it means the speaker will have 30 seconds left to speak. A louder second bell will signal that the time is up. If you're speaking in general about all of the permits, I ask that you speak once and not to each permit application. After public comments are completed, I'll close the item. We'll now begin the hearing. For order number 200-824, may I have the department make the presentation?
Good evening. My name is Susan Nawberry. I'll be representing the Bureau of Urban Forestry tonight. This is just a brief overview of our tree pruning schedule for Street Tree SF. Sometimes these cases are about trees just being a nuisance. So I just wanted to make sure, if people are applying for tree removal on the basis that they don't want to maintain their tree, the city of San Francisco is maintaining all of the street trees, and we'll be addressing them according to this grid schedule. This first order, 1380 Greenwich Street, I believe was canceled. Is anyone present for 1380 Greenwich? Okay. So the applicant withdrew, as far as we know, so we can skip 1380 Greenwich.
Okay, we'll close order number 200-824, and we'll move on to order 200-825.
The removal of 2 street trees with replacement of 1 tree with an asterisk adjacent to 1736 Fitzgerald. The tree is actually on Egbert, and staff has denied the removal and the owner has appealed. It's 2 Eucalyptus sideroxylon, globulus. And they are street trees, although they are in the property side. And that is the public right-of-way where you see the trees. And the reason for removal was the expansion of the driveway curb cut. So we want to see more about working around those trees instead of expanding that curb cut and eliminating those 2 trees. It takes a long time for trees in the city of San Francisco to become established. So I just want to point out that that is public right-of-way, and I'd ask the applicant to be sure that the Bureau of Streets and Mapping won't require a right-of-way conformity, requiring that that path of travel be made into a real sidewalk. If that is the case, the trees could be replaceable with 1 at the curb. If that is not the case, I believe the applicant owns the property across the street and has offered to plant a replacement tree across the street. Because they're larger and established trees, and it's difficult to get trees established in the city of San Francisco, Buff staff denied the tree removal application.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Good evening. Okay, hold on a second. I just have to do this. Can I use the overhead?
Yeah, I'm turning it on for you. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Tony Ponteleone, and I'm the architect for the expansion of the facility, which is necessitating the request to remove actually 1 tree. We don't need to remove both trees. If possible, we could live with just the far tree on the right. As you can see in the photo there, this is the rear of a dairy warehouse. They supply dairy products to hotels and restaurants in San Francisco. There's 3 trucks you see currently at the rear loading dock. Okay, hold on a second. Let's see if we can get the whole thing up. Yes. Yeah, okay, all right. Well, this is the Fitzgerald side of the project, the property. You can see it's a triangular lot as it goes back to Egbert. And you see up at the top is the 1 tree that we'd like to remove. The shaded area is an addition that we're doing. We're adding approximately, I can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's like 800 square feet to the rear of the building. And therefore, we're reducing the amount of truck maneuvering area for the loading of the vehicles to deliver to San Francisco. What happens is the product comes in off of Fitzgerald, and on the right here, you see this is the loading dock right here, where, oh, thank you so much, sweetheart, you're an angel. That's where the product comes in, okay, and then it exits out the rear. What we're proposing to do is this shows, there's the tree, the 1 tree is dotted that we'd like to remove, and we weren't planning on, we'd like to enlarge the curb cut, but I have a feeling that might be difficult, but we weren't planning on doing that. We think we can live with the existing curb cut. And then the 2 trucks would maneuver into the loading dock to be loading and to be delivered in San Francisco. In terms of the right-of-way, the pathway, because as you show in your photograph there, can you go back to this photograph? Perfect, right there? That's perfect. There you go. Because there's enough room to the right of the planting area for a 4-foot accessible way, I don't think we'll need to switch them. In other words, I don't think the city streets and mapping department would require us to, put a walkway right where all the trees are. So, this is the owner of the property. I'd like to say a few words.
Thank you. My name is Steve Herrera. I'm the owner of VNC Foods. I just wanted to give you some of the rationale why we're trying to accomplish this. First of all, we've been operating in San Francisco since 1945. We're second-generation dairy distributor. We're one of 2 remaining distributors in the city. And, the challenges we're faced, and the need for expansion, expanding our capabilities is due to the fact that we receive dairy products every morning, truckloads of dairy products from multiple dairies, eggs and butter and so forth. And, we load anywhere from 5 to 7 trucks on a daily basis. Challenges getting around the city and getting our trucks out on the streets and getting to our customers, is getting more difficult. And so we're looking to expand and invest in the business and stay local. And, that's the reasoning. So that, we're very happy to replace the one tree. We ask that we, amend the original application for 2. Ask if it's a reasonable accommodation to allow us to remove the one, to allow us to expand the business, stay local. The reality is otherwise, over time we're going to have to look for another warehouse, which is very difficult to find anything that'll accommodate our business within the city. And we want to stay here, want to stay and continue operating as a San Francisco-based dairy distributor. So that's what we'd like to accomplish. We're more than willing to place a tree somewhere else on the property, or pay a fee to plant elsewhere, or whatever reasonable compromise, hopefully, that we can accomplish with you. Our goal is to keep the business operating in San Francisco and stay viable and change with the times and the challenges we face. Thank you.
Thank you.
Forgot to mention, but if we could use the overhead one more time, please, thank you. Of course, if it's okay with staff, there is an opportunity, we think, that in this right-hand corner, far right-hand corner, again, this is the main entrance to the place, and the truck loading dock is on the right. But we think that we could plant a tree on our property, right there, if possible, if the department thinks it's okay to plant it there. We'd like to plant one right in the front, but there's a spot right here, but there's a water meter right in the ground, and it prohibits us from planting a tree there. Otherwise, we would plant it right there. So
Thank
we're
you.
willing to plant a tree or pay the in lieu fee, whatever you suggest.
Thank you. I have a follow-up for the department. You mentioned that there was a possible location for another tree to be a replacement tree. Has that been discussed? Is that the same location that the gentlemen were showing?
I don't believe that's the same location. It also sounds like you guys are adding 800 square feet. You guys are to the building? Okay, so that actually does trigger our tree planting code. So when they do get that through the building permit, the replacement based on the entire frontage of the lot will be counted for, and in lieu fees will be due. So if these trees were approved, the replacements would basically be required to be at the curb where there's room, or paid in lieu fees. So the building permit essentially kind of covers any sort of required replacement with regards to this tree removal application.
Okay.
Well, just for more input, we did deal with staff, and they looked at the Fitzgerald side of the building, and there was no place to plant any trees in the sidewalk. So we were going to have to pay in lieu fees for that side, no matter what. That's what we were determined. So
So we'll count all of it and look all
the way around?
frontages, yeah.
And again, we're acceptable to trying to find, we're more than happy to plant a tree no matter where we can.
Okay. But today we're just focused on whether or not the department will allow that one single tree, the larger eucalyptus, to be removed. Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone from the public here to protest this particular order?
My name is Josh Klipp. I live in San Francisco. Just a note about that photo that it looks like those are the only 2 trees on the entire block. Also, this is located in the Bay Shore, which has one of the lowest canopy percentages of any neighborhood in the city, and also the highest rate of child asthma. This is also in an industrial area where there are a lot of trucks, construction, and freeways, where we need as many large statured, established, productive trees as possible to draw down urban heat island and air pollution. I would ask also, what other alternatives have been explored? Have there been any other options that have been looked at other than what appears to be a driveway widening? Since this is part of an expansion project, has anyone at the city, other than urban forestry, looked at this from a sort of engineering or construction or layout perspective even? And then my final question would be, leaving aside required replacement trees, how would the city be in any position to enforce promised plantings that fall outside of Article 16? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here for this order? Okay, thank you. We'll close this order 200-825, and we'll move to order number 200-828.
So this is Susan Nauber at the Bureau of Urban Forestry. This case is with regards to removal of 4 trees with replacement adjacent to 1965 Market. The staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. So 2 of the trees are street trees and 2 of the trees are what's known as significant trees. And this significant tree is not in the public right-of-way and it is not maintained by Public Works, but is within 10 feet of the right-of-way. So tree 1 is a street tree. It's fairly small. It's just been established. And typically trees like this do not survive construction impacts very well. So the root ball is very small. It's generally 1 or 2 times the width of the canopy, the diameter of the canopy. So essentially all the street improvement activities that will occur could possibly negatively impact the tree. It remains to be seen, but because a tree of this size could typically be replanted in kind, urban forestry staff approved this tree removal. And the second tree is also a platanus. It's a street tree, and it is kind of doing okay. So it has some leaves. It's deciduous, so it's not a very good picture this time of year, but generally these trees tend to get anthracnose, and it's not the most vigorous tree, so it could be replaced in kind. It's pretty much about the same size as a tree you could get at a nursery in a 36-inch box. In fact, both the trees could be replaced almost in kind with a 36-inch box. The 2 more important trees, in my opinion, are these significant trees. So these trees are not maintained by Public Works. They are on private property. They are behind the sidewalk, but because they are within 10 feet of the public right-of-way, and they are over 20 feet tall and over 12 inches in diameter and over 15-foot canopy spread, they're qualified as significant trees. And because they're within the footprint of the building, ensuring that would have to occur for footings in the building, the design of that building does not include retaining these significant trees, and because the trees are on private property, we had to approve the removal. They are actually very healthy, established trees with really vigorous canopies, and they have fairly good structure. This is just a different picture from a different time of year, just to show their structure. They're not perfect structure, but they could certainly be corrected with pruning. And just another view of this, how it's within the footprint of the building. We've been asked by the public numerous times that a young tree doesn't replace the canopy benefits of these trees. And just to point out, these does appear on their plans that they can replant all 4 of these trees. And there's a tree on Market Street on the left, which I did not circle, that is not going to be removed. And this looks like their replanting plan here. Basically, we had our urban forestry inspector appraise the value of these trees based on their diameter. And the larger tree appraised at $28,200, and the smaller tree appraised at $19,100. And the reason we appraise these is due to a request from a member of the public that we appraise trees based on their value and not simply their ability to be replaced by a young tree. So that is informational, that appraised value. One appraised value tree could take the place of one in lieu fee, but only one in lieu fee, not all of the in lieu fees. So as I said, these are significant trees in the footprint of the building, and to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, urban forestry staff approved the removal of these trees.
Just a quick follow-up. Has the department reviewed the health of these trees in the
Yes.
assessment?
The Bureau of Urban Forestry found that these trees were fairly healthy and vigorous.
Thank you.
No street tree is perfect, but these trees are doing a lot better than most of the botanist in the area, and they are very healthy.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to protest the removal of these trees?
Hi, my name is John Nolte, and this is the developer of this property wants to do a tall building that was approved, which is this, the executive summary of it, and down here it goes into more details of the property. And unfortunately, because of the, as was stated, the significant trees, and this is inside their packet for the trees. These two trees are right here, the significant ones, and the other two are over here. And nobody seemed to talk to, when it was approved by the planning department, nobody ever discussed the, working around these two trees and incorporating them into the open space of the property. So, the significant trees should stay, and they should be redesigned around the property because, again, this is a parking lot, so there's no reason for the significant trees that were just valued at almost $40,000 be removed. Now, looking at these trees, these are the two trees. And you see, the only thing you have is a utility box right here. And again, since I haven't heard from the project sponsor, don't know if this utility box has to go or not, and therefore, it might have to stay. And if it has to stay, the trees have to stay. See what I'm getting at? So there's no reason for the removal. Then, the other two trees on Market, well, unfortunately, one is, has nothing. No, this one down here is not. She said it was healthy, but it's been chopped. It has no leaves. I mean, it's kind of dying here. And this is a recent picture, by the way. I don't know when she took hers. And the second one, well, again, since when you build, you have to put in trees anyway. So these two, I can understand taking these out and putting them back in after the project, but going back to my design, this here, don't see why they can't work on the 78 feet here to work the building and save this area right here and significant trees. So they can do that, and they've done it on other projects. So I think that's what the community would want, to save those two significant trees. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else here protesting the removal?
Josh Klipp. So I have three questions. The first question is, well, since I don't know where this is in the permit and review process, if this has already been given its conditional use permits, what was the design that was discussed when the project sponsor sought those permits? Sort of addendum question to that is, was there any pushback from city reviewers to explore alternatives? And then finally, third question is, since we're talking about replacing 2 significant trees, has there been any discussion with the project of at 1-to-1 with significant trees is not a tree replacement? So I'm wondering if there's been any discussion of a better way that that might be achieved if this is indeed the only way forward. Thank you.
Sorry, what was I got 2 questions. You said you had 3? I got
Yeah. Well,
conditional use permit.
what was discussed in the conditional use permit process, assuming that's already happened?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, was there any pushback to explore any alternatives to removal, whether that's in design or whether that's in construction, the logistics, or what have you? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here protesting the removal of these trees? Is the applicant present? Can the Bureau speak to any of the questions raised by Mr. Klipp about the process for obtaining permit approval?
Generally, the planning department, they may or may not consider a significant tree. They would typically consider a street tree now. And the Bureau of Urban Forestry is a little earlier in the permit process. However, I can provide Josh Klipp with information on whether or not we've actually released the specific building permit. But typically, when a tree's in the footprint of the building, we usually approve the tree and release the building permit on the condition that they protect the tree. It doesn't appear that any work has begun in this area, so I don't think we've actually approved the release. I think they came to us early enough in the process, but we can actually see if the planning department had any sort of review based on the tree. Typically, when the planning department discusses any sort of development, a hearing would have to be requested by a member of the public. The planning department may or may not consider tree removal.
And then as far as the replacement value, is that an in lieu fee to replace those, or is there some way to, I don't know what you're suggesting, replant the larger tree, or?
The significant trees are typically not included in the street tree planting calculation. They're usually in addition to any in lieu fees that would be required based on their construction. I have to review their checklist again, but I believe based on their entire frontage, they may owe 11 trees. But again, we'll double check that. And if they can't plant 11 trees, for example, they can only plant 5, they would owe 6 in lieu fees. And that would not be, the significant trees would not cover those 6 in lieu fees. They're separate, basically. If they're removing street trees, those in lieu fees could count, this appraised value could count for 1 in lieu fee. So one $20,000 in lieu fee could count for only one of the 6. But in this case, since they're significant, it would be in addition to those in lieu fees.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll close order 200-828 and move to order number 200-829.
The Bureau of Urban Forestry actually requested to postpone this case because of, and I know it says removal of 5, but in the hearing notice, we made a typo and we wrote removal of 1 tree. We want to repost those notices so that the public have a fair chance of protesting all 5 trees if they wish. So we made a typo. Original order stated 1 to be removed, but it's actually 5 trees to be removed. And the reason we posted these trees is because of a routine key map. It wasn't requested by any developer. It was based on their structure. but we will be postponing this case and hearing it at the next hearing.
Okay. Was there anyone here that came tonight to speak on this case?
Again, I have questions about adding trees to a posting. This is the original posting of the tree. I mean, you want to look at this. It says 4. Now they're up to 5. So they had 4. I don't care how they get down to 1, but it's 5 when I protested it. 4. So, and then I had a problem looking at this because this whole address here is in front of a parking lot. And so on the, going toward Fifth Street to 5th, which ones are being removed? I mean, they were all tagged. I couldn't figure out which tree was being removed. That's that side, that's from the middle of the street to 5th, and this is from the middle of the street down to 4th, and these are all ficus trees. So I have a concern when they come back and tell me they want to remove 4, now they want to move 5, and this is a problem. Because they keep on changing what they want. And obviously, one of the trees went down already during the storm, so that took care of one. So actually, there were 6, because one went down in the January storm, and it was made news, and they showed the video of it cutting it down because it came down and hit the wires on Mission Street and stopping the bus. So actually, there were 6. So. And that one has been totally removed because it came down during the storm. It split. And so maybe she should talk about that too. So how many are actually at the site at 807 Mission are proposing being removed because these are all ficus trees?
Okay, well, it sounds like they're going to get reposted and there'll be a
Well,
hearing
but
for this.
people can't keep it going around, running around just because, I don't work for Burv, I don't have a car, and there are over 400 miles of roadway in San Francisco with trees, and nobody has that kind of time to go up and down every street to figure out where they've been posted.
Is there the ability that we can maybe highlight, like on a photo?
I have a statement on that. They have on ficus trees. They have started on their website. They have started posting when they want to remove a tree on their website for ficus trees specifically, and these are ficus trees. So I suggested they be put there on the website, the page that they already have started, because there's already some already there. 20-something already there under the ficus. So this should be there too, because they only started that in February, and these were posted in January. So I would suggest that the public know, and the reason why, because this becomes tedious on the public, just because they made a mistake, 2 mistakes, because this is the original posting, 4, and then they went up to 6 because one of them, like I said, went down, and now they want to remove 5 out of a large block parking lot. So I would like that posting, which they currently have on their website for ficus trees, this location.
Okay, we'll do what we can to share the information with you so you can see it online.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. They already have started that process because they have all these ficus trees they want to take away in San Francisco, and people are upset when you're talking about a large percentage of the urban canopy ficus trees.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here that came specifically for this item? Okay, since the hearing's being postponed, I'll recommend postponing to future hearing after they get reposted. And maybe the department can send a note to or email when the anticipated hearing is for that.
Yeah, we will contact Mr. Nolte when we schedule this for the next hearing.
Thank you. So we'll close order 200-829 and move to order 200-830.
Susan Nauberry, Bureau of Urban Forestry. So this is for the removal of 3 street trees with replacement adjacent to 251 Ashbury. The staff has removed the removal and the public has protested. So it's 3 Ficus nitida, and they have fairly poor structure. These were to be maintained in 2020, and the Bureau of Urban Forestry would most likely at that point pursue removal. However, the applicant requested the removal of these trees and then offered to take on the expense of removal and replacement. Essentially, these trees have very good vigor. So good health is when a tree grows very quickly because it's healthy, and then the vigor is the tree's natural ability to grow based on its species. So there's vitality and there's vigor. And ficus, even when in poor condition, have much better vigor than other trees of other species. So vigor is species specific, and vitality is related to the health of the tree. Ficus have very high vigor, so they grow very quickly based on their species profile. And also based on their species profile, they grow what's called included bark. And as one of the protesters commented, that we have a ficus information on our website. Right here you have what's known as codominant stems. And there's a thing called aspect ratio. And so when the 2 stems are approaching the same size, the ratio is 1 to 1. And what's ideal in forestry and good management is an aspect ratio of 1 to 2. So right now you have 2 stems that are approaching the same size, and the structural integrity of that stem is weakened. As you can see, it has a V-shaped union and a deep seam. That's called included bark, and that reduces the ability of tension wood to form on the top side of the wood, which helps keep the branch on to the main stem. This tree doesn't have that. So typically what we've seen across San Francisco and on Mission Street, as previously mentioned, are not just whole tree failure from decay accumulating in that bark, but large limb failures. So here are the other 2 trees. They are larger, they are established, but you can see they've had sidewalk damage at one point, which indicates that they've had roots pruned before. We try not to prune roots more than 3 times in a tree because it destabilizes the tree. And like I said, ficus have really good vigor, which means that they can grow very quickly and cause repeat sidewalk damage. And even though it has good vigor, the more you root prune a tree, the less stable it becomes. So here's a close-up of the structure. It has very, very deeply included bark. And what looks to be a pocket of decay in that main union. This to me indicates that it has very poor structural integrity. And the trees are not large, so I will say that they're not large. But that is because the property owner had been maintaining them. Now the maintenance is no longer the responsibility of the property owner. And essentially, the city of San Francisco is not going to come by and prune this tree annually or biannually. The pruning cycles right now are about 3 to 4 years. So generally in about 3 to 4 years, with the structure of these trees and the size that these species can obtain, the weight on these weakly attached limbs lead us, to be concerned about their structural integrity and the likelihood of failure. So here's another image. You can see, given that whole aspect ratio thing, there's a large limb that's kind of leaning over the road. We generally want the main stem, the leader, to be the largest limb, and right now that is not the case. And all these stems are rising from the same union. And here you can see that there's not a lot of trunk taper. There's not a large root flare, so that does lead me to be concerned about the structural integrity of the roots. There's another view of that ficus tree. So, and there's again that aspect ratio. The main stem is not the largest stem. The lateral stem is the largest stem, and in this case, you can see that deeply included bark This is very textbook sort of structure for ficus that tend to fail. And there's another image of that poor structure. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases in our experience with large limb failures in ficus trees, and the willingness of the property owner to take on the costs of removal and replacement of all 3 street trees, and the fact that these trees are under high voltage lines, which means that a species of this stature will be repeatedly topped by PG&E in order to maintain the safety of their power lines. It's not only the wrong tree in the wrong place, but the structure is not sustainable in the long term given our pruning cycle. So urban forestry staff approved the application to remove and replace all 3 street trees.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to protest the removal of these trees?
Hi, my name is Jeff Bean. I live at 236 Ashbury, which is right across the street from these trees. These trees, 2 of them, I heard multiple times today, people talk about how, the urban forestry, that it's hard to have mature trees, street trees, and these are 2 examples of them. And so when we saw the news that, they were being removed, we were kind of just scratching our head because that's the only mature trees in that entire side of the block. And so, some of the reasons that we heard for bringing down the trees, like for instance, one of the reasons was the property owner couldn't put up scaffolding to be able to do maintenance on the building. So they've since put up scaffolding, and so that's clearly that reason maybe has been since removed as a rationale. But it's either they were kind of lying about the reason for removing the trees, or that was just kind of a stretch of the truth on that. I'm not an expert on ficus trees. I just saw that, when you remove these trees, it's going to impact our privacy. It's going to impact the beauty of the block. And I think, I can speak for 5 or 6 neighbors that were really saddened by seeing this news. To the extent that for whatever reason, the committee decides that, the trees have to be removed, I think there should be at least some degree of accountability around what constitutes a replacement tree. These are 2 mature trees that have been around for 20, 30 years that have great scale and beauty. And so the concept of putting in a, 5-foot suckling little tree is not really a replacement. And so I'd like to see some accountability around what is done for that. The 3rd tree, which is being removed, there was no mention of, root failure or that, the branch failure. Obviously, they're just cutting that tree down, I guess, with the other 2 because they don't match potentially. So I'm not sure what the rationale is for the 3rd tree being removed, but either way, it's not as, beautiful as the 2 other large trees that are being removed.
Oh, okay. That's the aspect ratio, 1:1.
So it has poor structure, which is part of why it's being included. But it is small.
I guess the only other thing I would say is, and maybe it's not reasonable, but, I don't quite understand why they couldn't figure out an effective way of trimming it to be able to maintain what is a 30-year-old tree and deal with the issues around, I guess, the sustainability of the tree. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here to protest 200-830?
My name is John Nolte. I'm here on behalf of San Francisco Tree Campaign and the 3 ficus trees at 251 Ashbury. The 2 larger ones, as the person that lives on the street stated, they are 30 years old. And I can understand, there's a problem with PG&E and the high voltage on trimming the tree constantly because that's mandated by PG&E. So On those two trees, I would suggest that we want a 36 box trees planted in lieu of, and then the other one is a smaller tree, so that would probably be like a 24-inch box, and that would have to be put into the motion of the granting of the trees to be removed, so that we have larger box trees. They would be more mature, and they would probably grow faster, and we would want something that would have consistent with the shade and the habitat that the two trees currently give to the that street. So we'd want something that would be that would grow fast and also give the habitat for the birds and so forth to go back into when they were removed. And we want the trees removed, when they're removed, we want them planted within less than 3 months. That's mandated. We want to have it within 3 months because otherwise we lose the habitat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is the applicant present?
Yes, my name is Joel Nelson, and I'm the owner of the property, and I submitted the application for removal of these trees based on the fact that they are a hazard. And it's well known that ficus trees represent a hazard. And in fact, thanks to your explanation, it's a much greater hazard than I even imagined. And I just am grateful that we've managed to get through the last 3 months of bad weather and high winds without these trees coming down. So it is exclusively based on the safety and welfare of pedestrians on the sidewalk as well as vehicles parked on the street that I've made this application.
Thank you. And you've, as part of your application, you've offered also to replace the trees.
That remove and replace, yes, with city-approved trees, of course.
And you heard the gentleman's conditions that he proposed. How does that ring with your plans?
Well, I mean, the thing is I had this discussion with Urban Forestry about, you know, the replacement of the trees. And I inquired not only to get a list of city-approved trees, but also what size would be acceptable, you know, to replace these trees. And I was informed, and I'm not quite sure of what this box tree situation is, but it does indicate a particular size. Is that correct?
I'll let the Bureau respond to that.
For a tree replacement that is not triggered by addition of a dwelling unit, addition of 500 gross square feet, or addition of a curb cut or garage, the minimum required replacement size is 15 gallon, unless otherwise mandated in a public works hearing. But per our Public Works Code, Article 16, a 15 gallon tree is the replacement size typically mandated.
And that's the information that I had over the phone as well, that a 15-gallon tree would be the acceptable replacement tree.
Okay. Well, would you entertain a larger tree if that was an acceptable compromise?
What's the cost differential in a 5-gallon and?
It's usually a couple $100 difference. It depends on the nursery. Like, sometimes a 15 gallon can be like $200 depending on the species, and then maybe a 24-inch box could be $500.
Well, this is new news, obviously. Do I have to give you an answer to
No,
that right now?
We're trying to get to the bottom of what the concerns are from your neighbors and weigh it all in. So I'm trying to find out what your response is to the neighbor's complaint about removing these trees. And he brought up concerns that the replacement tree wouldn't adequately make up for what's being taken out. So you don't have to answer. I'm just throwing it out there to find out what your willingness is, since you're the one applying to take these trees out.
Right. Well, I would be willing to consider that, but I'm not ready to give you an answer right now.
Sure. Okay, we'll follow up and discuss. If we need to reach out to you again, we will.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here from the applicant's side to talk about the case? Does the Bureau have any follow-up comments? Okay, we'll close this order and move to order number 200-831.
Removal of one street tree without replacement adjacent to 154 21st Avenue. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. So we have a Corymbia ficifolia. This is a large, healthy in terms of its canopy, very vigorous street tree. Unfortunately, it lost several limbs over the course of the storms in the past few months. And here you can see that this tree has a 1:1:1 aspect ratio, which, as we discussed, we want the main leader to have the largest stem and the remaining two to have a much smaller ratio. And again, that leads to weakly attached limbs. So you can see here that the main leader in the middle does not have the largest stem. So those two on the side there are weakly attached. It's a V-shaped union, and we don't want that. That reduces the ability for tension wood to build. So unfortunately, this tree was topped a long time ago, but you can see how you have a very large limb, and then suddenly you have several small limbs attached at this larger limb. There's no taper. And that means there's not very good reaction wood to keep these limbs attached. And these limbs look small, but when we received the email from the constituent, one of those limbs is about 10 feet long and about 5 inches in diameter. So they're really large, and you can imagine waking up in the morning after that large storm and finding one of these on the sidewalk in front of your house. So unfortunately, because this tree was topped in the past, and it could have been years ago. We never really found out when. But basically, these limbs are very weakly attached. And so there's not really a good way to restructure this canopy. We did consider it. We looked into it. But just trying to select one of these leaders and help it become the main leader, it's still going to be very, very weakly attached because of the ratio of that original limb and the sprout that's coming off of it. So there's just another image of that topping cut. Unfortunately, the tree cannot be replaced, and it is because it is next to that utility pole and driveway. There's just not a feasible replacement spot, but because we can't have trees really failing in the public right-of-way, it does actually, it is a loss of canopy here. That was a lot of canopy. But you have two schools of people in San Francisco, and you have some people that don't believe that you can, if you have canopy like this that you can't maintain, and you have limbs failing, it undermines people's faith in our management of the urban forest when you have large trees that fail. Because we want large trees in San Francisco, but we actually have to maintain trees with good structure, and this tree does not have it. So it undermines people's faith in having large, healthy, established trees when you have trees that have poor structure. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, urban forestry staff approved the removal of this street tree, and we could not approve a replacement due to the utility constraints.
Thank you. Anyone here to protest the removal of this tree? Is the applicant present for this order? Okay, we'll close this order and move to order 200-832. So this is removal of one street tree without replacement. It's a Monterey pine
It's located in the median in between Market Street and Clayton. Staff has approved the removal and the public has protested. So it's a Pinus radiata. It is basically growing up against that Muni pole, and there are 2 Muni lines growing through it. Those Muni lines do carry electricity. You can see from this angle that this tree is actually in decline. Once Pinus radiata are affected by bark beetle or pitch canker, it is 100% mortality rate. It's rare that they come back from this disease. And you can see that there's flagging in the remaining canopy, and there's dead wood from the rest of the canopy dying due to pitch canker. They are actually, despite their size, they are a short-lived species. They put most of their energy into growing large quickly, which is why they can get so large in a short amount of time. And for this reason, they do not put on any energy towards fighting decay or diseases. They're actually more of a serotinous species. They're supposed to be planted where there's wildfire and stand replacement fires. So that's why you see them decline so rapidly in an urban setting. So it's interfering with electric Muni lines. And this is a slope. I just want to point out, Pinus radiata have a species failure profile of whole tree failure, which means pines just don't put on very good roots on slopes. This is on a slope above Market Street. So it's being girdled by ivy, and because it's in poor condition, it's declining and is diseased. The location on the slope concerns me. And once again, this is to point out that the tree is in decline. It is not putting on new wood, new growth at the top. It is senescing. So to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, urban forestry staff approved the removal of this street tree.
Thank you. Is there anyone here to protest the removal of this tree?
Josh Klipp, I'm mostly curious about why there's no possibility for any type of replacement. I mean, I understand it's sloped, and some would say that trees actually would prevent further erosion, I suppose, depending on the species that was put there. But I'm curious why we've got this lovely little green space that I don't know if this is private property or city property, but I'm wondering why we wouldn't be fully utilizing that to plant more trees there instead of just taking them out. So that's all.
Thank you. Please.
My name is Judith Lewis, and I live at 1497 Clayton Street, and I live directly across the street from this tree, and I've lived there for 40 years, and the tree's been there for about 30 years. And I agree with all the things that you said. I came tonight to support your decision to remove the tree because living there, I can see what a danger it is to the public with the different, with the dead limbs and running through the electric lines and being on the slope where it could fall on Market Street, where fires could start from all the sparks coming out of the 33 bus going by. Now, what I want to address are the comments that the man just made. I belong to the Corbett Heights Neighbors Association, and one of our main purposes is to try to beautify the little pocket parks and green areas in Corbett and Clayton Streets. And this is one of the areas, and it's been in the worst shape of any of our green areas for many years. And during the last year, we've had a volunteer who's removed a large part of the ivy that just encroaches and ruins anything there. And one of our purposes is that we do want to put in a decorative tree there. If that tree was ever removed, there's funds in the Corbett Neighbors that can be applied for with the agreement of your department to find something that would be pretty and the right size and be healthy for that area. And we would try to keep on improving that, and with the use of volunteers who could do the pruning perhaps on the tree. It's impossible with that great big monstrosity that's there. and I'm so glad that it's going to be removed. It's been a danger for a long time, but be assured that there is an association who will keep working and trying to improve on the area, and we would try to add an appropriate pretty tree there if at all possible.
Thank you. Sorry, ma'am. Miss Lewis, is this a letter? Is this what you read? I just don't know what this is.
It's got the same pretty much content. It had more of the things that the young woman spoke about. I didn't go into all the things that I just
Okay.
agree with her.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Alty, and I know this area of Carbage, Clayton Street, and so off Market, and so again, you can see that there's green there. So if the tree is to be removed and the association does have money, I think that there should be a tree, one or more, that could be fit into that area. Ivy, I grew up on the western side of San Francisco, and so when you're talking about ivy, ivy is an invasive plant, but still it can be taken out, and so they have not really taken out the ivy to uncover the earth that's at that location, and therefore could plant more than one tree. So I think that it would be behooves in the removing, since this is not a street tree, this is a on some other type of property, that one or more trees could be planted in that open space that they're on that plate location. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad no one's here to protest the removal of this tree. Is there any reason that the department knows why a tree replacement is not considered or not possible at that location?
It may have been due to the slope, but we are certainly willing to work with the neighborhood association on replacement and to determine feasibility. The Bureau of Urban Forestry has very, very limited watering resources. While we just received $19 million a year for Prop E, that only covers removal and pruning, and unfortunately does not cover replacement. So we are struggling, our landscaping sector is struggling to replant and water trees. So we do ask that if the neighborhood wants trees, we get a full commitment on watering, and watering is about 20 gallons a week for 3 to 5 years until the tree is established. At that point, the city will take on the maintenance of the tree, and we will certainly look into replacement because we do want people to replace trees, and we do want replacement trees.
Thank you. Anyone else here for this order? Okay, we'll close this order and move to the last order, 200-837.
Susan Nauberry, Bureau of Urban Forestry. So to consider the removal of 5 street trees with replacement adjacent to 1140 Harrison. Urban Forestry staff has denied the removal and the owner has appealed. So this is one magnolia, tree 1 at on Harrison. It's not actually on the property, I believe. It's adjacent to. So they actually requested to remove that. It's you can see it's the structure. It can be restructured. It's still young. It's very healthy, and like we've mentioned over and over, and as you've heard from constituents, it's very hard to get a tree established. And when you can get a tree established that actually has structure that we can work with, we're very hesitant to approve removal. And this is the second tree. This is the tree on the left, the same tree. The tree was inspected when the application first came in, and then the urban forestry inspector came back to look at the tree. The building had already been demoed. The tree remained. We believe that they can work around this tree because of this picture where they're working around the tree. And we also want to point out that there's a complete lack of tree protection here. The urban forestry staff, so the Bureau of Urban Forestry requires tree protection, and it is in our Public Works Code. So anytime you glance at our website or print a removal application, it tells you about the Public Works Code. Tree protection is required in front of construction at all times. Even if you think you didn't know, the ignorance of tree protection is not an excuse. So the urban forestry staff will be looking into this lack of tree protection here. But I do want to point out that they are working around this tree right now. So this is the other tree. Again, it's fairly young. You can work with the structure. It could probably use some additional watering and mulching to increase the vigor of this tree. But again, this complete lack of tree protection and exposure of the earth around it does cause some desiccation. So again, we're lacking tree protection here, but they are seeming to be able to work around it. And this is a third tree, another magnolia, where again, they appear to be working around it with a complete lack of tree protection. And the reason why we need trees protected during construction, even if they intend to remove it, is because we need to post for 30 days so that the public can protest and have their say about the tree removal, because often the public doesn't get a chance to talk about tree removal in the planning phase. And this is a Platanus on Harrison. Again, it's just another established tree that we'd like to retain and see if they can work around. And again, they appear to be working around it, although there's a complete and utter lack of tree protection. And then tree 5, unfortunately, it looks like it's right up against the building. I believe the building is on the right, and the applicant can correct me if that's not true. So apparently in the demolition, this tree was illegally removed. So we will be addressing that, but we do think if they could have pieced down that building carefully and maybe widen the sidewalk around there, perhaps that's not feasible, but we would have liked that option explored. But by the time the inspector got to look at this tree again, so you can see they went out in December. There's a timestamp on that photo. But he went back out and he said that tree is gone. So we will be addressing that. So it's really denial of 4 trees because this tree is gone. And to be consistent with how we handle similar cases, urban forestry staff denied the removal of the 4 trees, and we will be issuing a fine for the 5th illegally removed tree.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? Yes. Please give your testimony.
Good evening. My name is Scott Udall. I'm with 1140 Harrison Associates. We are the property owner and the applicant for both the project and for the tree removal application for the street trees. Regarding the removal application, the removal of these trees is consistent with the Planning Commission approval of the project from April 26, 2018, motion 20166, which called for the removal of these 5 street trees and replacement with 10 new street trees on Harrison. It was part of a streetscape plan that was approved by the SDAT, Street Design Advisory Team, in 2017. Yeah, I don't know if I got this camera. Sorry? Turn this around? Oh, there, sorry, now I see it. It's going to be hard. I believe I have this upside down, but basically what you see are the 10 proposed street trees with no street trees on Berwick, and I will get to the Berwick tree at the end. As part of the Better Streets plan, we have widened in working in concert with SDAT, SFMTA, planning staff, public works staff. The plans called for a widening of the sidewalk from its 8 feet existing width to 15 feet. And so, and sorry for the glare, let me flip this right side up so I can just, this is along Harrison Street. What you see in that red band there, that is the existing location of those 4 trees on Harrison to be removed. The green circles are the proposed planted Lundin planes that exist in the street planting zone. The Better Streets Plan prescribes 4 to 5 feet of planting zone behind the curb for planting and furniture. That's where the new trees would go. If these 4 trees were to remain, they would basically be right in the middle of the new widened sidewalk, only leaving 5 feet for pedestrian movements. And instead, we should be having 8 to 10 feet of pedestrian movement here along Harrison. The first tree that was mentioned by Bureau staff is located off our site. That is correct. It's because and you see it there on the right. I'm afraid to lift my hand here, but we are required to widen the sidewalk all the way to Langton Street. So our public improvements continue to the end of the block, including this section where this other tree was. So it was not practical to keep these existing trees right in the middle of a 15-foot sidewalk. And as mentioned previously, we are installing 10 new street trees in this location. Regarding the tree on Berwick, we are saving 750 lineal feet of a 30-foot tall brick wall around the back of the project in consultation with the neighbors and historical planning staff. The tree that was mentioned on Berwick was one, it's in a 20-foot alley with only 4-foot sidewalks. It actually is illegally blocking pedestrian access along the sidewalk there. Berwick is 2 4-foot sidewalks and a 12-foot vehicular lane. And this tree basically took up all of the sidewalk as well as part of the lane. And we couldn't meet even having, public access around the perimeter of the site with it remaining. And I know I'm out of time, just will say that the shoring operations on the inside of the wall that we're required to do to actually hold that wall up, basically there was a safety issue in the field that conflicted with the shoring and the tree, which necessitated its removal in the field rather than risk it falling down on one of the neighbors. So I know I'm out of time, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on this case from the applicant side, from the protest side?
Josh Klipp, and for purposes of this comment, I'll also identify that I'm a certified access specialist. In terms of widening the sidewalk, criteria for removal is not just that a sidewalk is being widened, and the 5-foot path of travel is actually 1 foot more than is required by the California Building Code. So simply having a 5-foot or a tree in the middle of a sidewalk that's 10 or 15 feet wide does not in and of itself constitute something that's illegal. The installing of 10 new trees, that's not really a compensation for this loss. It keeps sort of being restated, but that's just a matter of what's already required by law, so it doesn't really offset the loss. The fact that there were 5 healthy trees, 1 was illegally removed, the remaining are apparently unprotected. I would implore Public Works to partner with the Department of Building Inspection and visit Section 808 of Public Works Code, Article 16, where it talks about permits being conditioned on there actually being tree protection in place. And I would encourage Public Works and Building Inspection to consider the possibility of revoking construction permits until this issue is evaluated. It's not something I bring up a lot, but in this instance, there seems to be a profound disregard for what were 5 healthy trees, established healthy trees that, as Urban Forestry has said, obviously could have been maintained and are a rare thing to find in this city, especially along some of these busier corridors like Harrison Street. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Nolte, and I have surveyed the area of Harrison Street in the past, doing street surveys, so I'm very aware of Harrison Street. I've done South of the Market, the whole South of the Market, and so when somebody comes in and talks about, deciding to do a project and then take out 5 trees, that's a very loss to the community. And Harrison is another gateway to the freeways down there. And I'm appalled that the applicant has gotten this far with removing of trees, irregard to what other agencies he stated were involved. Having 5 trees and 1 already gone, proposed to remove when you only need, as stated, 5 feet to walk on a sidewalk clearance. I find it very, very appalling that they just think that they can come and design a project and not take the safety of the 4 remaining trees and protect them. I've seen other projects that they do that. They put a orange barrier completely around it. Currently, we just have to look at Van Ness right now. You have orange barriers around trees that are being protected right now when we're doing Van Ness Avenue. So for them not to be to see what's going with all the construction going on around San Francisco and not drive by or see something, another project where they're protecting the trees while they're doing the construction is appalling to come in here and think that they have some unmoral obligation to not to protect those living creatures, the trees. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you address why the trees aren't protected?
I was just talking to our project manager about this. All I can say is unaware that they were unprotected, and they're going. Swift action is going to be taken to protect them immediately.
Thank you. Follow-up for the department. This question comes again similar to earlier. They're asserting that they already received approval in their plans for whatever their development is that includes taking those trees out and replacing. Is there any connection between what the applicant is saying about that they're already approved for these and what the appellants are saying as far as not going through the process?
In this case, we can review, because we've only recently been included in what they mentioned, SDAT, where the planning department has been allowing us to make comments well before they go into a building permit process. So we can actually review what was said in those. They're available online on Podio, and we have usernames, so we can see what the inspector wrote. This area was passed from one inspector to another, so we can just double check to see if either one inspector said the trees must be protected, or if another inspector said would be approved. However, regardless of whether or not someone said we may approve it, we still have to post the trees for removal and let the public know. Because often, like I said, the public doesn't necessarily understand that a new building means that every single tree is going to be removed, which is why our posting process is so critical. But generally, yeah, these get approved at the planning level, and the trees may or may not be considered, but we will double check what the SDAT in 2017 says, specifically regarding tree removal, and if they were proposed in that SDAT.
Thank you. And you mentioned that it's part of a larger project in conjunction with other city agencies that have also been included in that discussion. If you can elaborate on that, it will be helpful.
Sure, happy to clarify. The SDAT is across, and it sounds like the Bureau of Urban Forestry is maybe now a part of that. not that our project was part of a larger project, but that our project went through a significant review, public review, and both for the project itself and the design procedures, as well as the CEQA review, all of which was approved by the Planning Commission last April. SSTAT specifically is a cross-functional design team within City of San Francisco planning staff, Public Works, SFMTA, fire, police. Basically, the streetscape plans go to that cross-functional body. I was not aware that urban forestry was, and I don't know if they were on our project or not, but it did go through the process in 2017, and they basically, bless the streetscape plan to some degree. Ultimately, it's a planning commission that approves it, but the staff report for the planning commission last April did acknowledge that the streetscape plan was approved by Street Design Advisory Team in 2017. And just as a side comment, the project did go through 2.5 years of public review and community outreach and meetings, and enjoyed wide support from our immediate neighbors. So if people did not hear about it, I'm sorry that was the case, but there was quite an extensive public review process on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that had any comments or that came in late on any of the orders that we discussed tonight? Okay, thank you. With that, we'll close this hearing. And again, if you can leave your name if you want us to contact you on the list on your way out. Thank you.